Schools are closed, and everyone is talking about the virus. Children pick up on stress and may respond in different ways than adults. Love, attention, and routine can make them feel more secure. For more tips from Seattle children's experts to support your family as you cope, live, and learn during COVID, follow Seattle Children's on Facebook or visit seattlechildrens.org. Schools are closed, and everyone is talking about the virus. Children pick up on stress and may respond in different ways than adults. Love, attention, and routine can make them feel more secure. For more tips from Seattle children's experts to support your family as you cope, live, and learn during COVID, follow Seattle Children's on Facebook or visit seattlechildrens.org. Schools are closed, and everyone is talking about the virus. Children pick up on stress and may respond in different ways than adults. Love, attention, and routine can make them feel more secure. For more tips from Seattle children's experts to support your family as you cope, live, and learn during COVID, follow Seattle Children's on Facebook or visit seattlechildrens.org. Schools are closed, and everyone is talking about the virus. Children pick up on stress and may respond in different ways than adults. Love, attention, and routine can make them feel more secure. For more tips from Seattle children's experts to support your family as you cope, live, and learn during COVID, follow Seattle Children's on Facebook or visit seattlechildrens.org. Schools are closed, and everyone is talking about the virus. Children pick up on stress and may respond in different ways than adults. Love, attention, and routine can make them feel more secure. For more tips from Seattle children's experts to support your family as you cope, live, and learn during COVID, follow Seattle Children's on Facebook or visit seattlechildrens.org. Schools are closed, and everyone is talking about the virus. Children pick up on stress and may respond in different ways than adults. Love, attention, and routine can make them feel more secure. For more tips from Seattle children's experts to support your family as you cope, live, and learn during COVID, follow Seattle Children's on Facebook or visit seattlechildrens.org.
ParentMap webinar. Oops, sounds like I'm muted. Okay, I'm on. I couldn't tell, so apologies. Thank you for joining us for today's ParentMap webinar, Supporting Your Quarantine, Raising Happy, Healthy Kids in the New Normal, featuring Dr. Christine Carter. Christine is a prolific author and also was the executive director of UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center, and her latest book, The New Adolescents, Raising Happy and Successful Teens. I happened to pull out of the archives Christine's old galley from Raising Happiness, which is a phenomenal title that I highly recommend. And we also are really hoping that Christine is going to join us live October 13th in Seattle. My name is Elaine Sulkin, and for those of you not familiar with ParentMap, we are a content-rich resource assisting you in your parenting journey. We proudly publish magazines as well as books, and we produce dozens of live and now virtual events. Before I begin, I want to remind you today's webinar is being recorded and we might use it for educational promotional use. If you registered, you will automatically get a recording of today's event, and we invite your questions. So please look at the bottom of your screen where the Q&A box is. And we certainly couldn't do this without you registering. There's about 450 people registered to hear Christine Carter. So thank you for supporting our virtual events. And now more than ever, we thank our sponsors. So let's start with our long-term partner, Seattle Children's Hospital. Thank you. And also Alto Pharmacy, a new sponsor, presenting sponsor, as well as Child and Teen Solutions. At this time, I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Christine Carter, and she will take it from here. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, and it tickles me to see the galley of Raising Happiness come out of the ashes for this. That's a fun relic from the past that also speaks to how long my relationship with ParentMap has been around. So I thought I would begin today by just giving us all a little framework about why this is so difficult for teenagers to deal with. I think sheltering in place and dealing with a global pandemic is very difficult for all of us, much more difficult for some people than others. And at the same time, it seems to be hitting our teens in a way that is pretty hard for them. And there are some biological reasons why it tends to be harder for teenagers to handle sheltering in place. And the first reason, I mean, all of these things are kind of intuitive. We know this about our teenagers. The first reason is that their emotions tend to be amplified. And so anything that they might be feeling that's kind of challenging tends to be expressed louder and felt, in fact, more deeply, right? So this is thought to be evolutionary, that this is a way that adolescents tend to learn about their emotions. It's that they're actually amplified in their nervous systems. So when they're going through something that's difficult, their emotions tend to get much bigger. Another reason is that the adolescent brain is much more attuned to social hierarchy than and social status than a child's brain or an adult's brain. And again, this is, you know, a part of adolescence. So when I'm talking about adolescence, I don't really mean only teenagers. This starts to happen around 11 years old for girls, you know, a few years before puberty really hits, and continue until the mid-20s actually for boys, 26 even years old. So it's a very long decade, and I just use the word teenagers as for shorthand. But anyway, so attention to social status is super heightened during adolescence. And this means two things for us as parents. First of all, you know, cutting teenagers off from their peers, their friends are everything. And keeping them home, with their family is, it creates a sense of panic for them. They've been cut off from something that is very, very important to them. And actually the part of their brain that is attuned to social status is much more active during that time. So it does, the sheltering in place, even for introverts, can be much harder. It's also that attunement to status also affects how our kids respond to us, their parents, right? We tend to see them as our kids. They're always going to be our babies, right? And to them, they're part always going to be mom's baby and part already an adult. And it's sort of like a struggle between these two things, and it should be, as they're becoming more and more adult-like. But in their brains, the adult part of them has much higher status than the child part of them. And so being forced to stay at home just when you were starting to spread your wings and gain some independence from mom and dad is excruciating for for an adolescent. Their developmental job is to individuate, right? And now you're saying, and we're going to make this as hard as possible because you're stuck at home with your bossy mother who feels like the whole rest of the world is out of control. And so she's going to try and control your every move, right? Like it's just a recipe for disaster. And by the way, I was just completely describing myself, right? Like I like my ducks in a row and I got all my ducks are home right now. So it's hard. And then the last reason is that, adolescents are just starting to think about the future, right? The part of their brain responsible for planning is really starting to come online. That's physiological, but there's also a big cultural piece of this that in the United States and in Western cultures, we really ask kids to start thinking about who they will be as adults and what they are going to do with their lives when they're teenagers. They get to high school and it becomes all about, where are you going to go to college? We've been orienting them towards the future, and their futures just blew up, right? Like everything that they were excited about and planning on evaporated. So, that kind of uncertainty is hard for us all, but I think it's got to be a lot harder for teenagers when they just had their first purchases on a future outside of their childhood. So in any case, that's a little bit of a primer on what we're dealing with here. Those of us that have adolescents back at home or still stuck at home.
Right. I think no matter what age or kid you're bringing up, I'm because you enjoyed that we pulled out the old Raising Happiness. One of the points that you make, and I'm going to kind of incorporate some of the questions we've already gotten and take it back to Raising Happiness. Share some of the wisdom from that book, and especially step 2, building a village, given the unique moment that we're in. And, some of us are, everybody is forced into this village. And how do you, there's no choice here. So how do you help raise our kids' emotional intelligence, model behavior to create a stronger village when our kids are wanting to maybe fly away as fast as they can?
Yeah, so the trick here is, I think actually there is still very much a choice, and kids haven't been forced into a village. They feel like they've been forced out of it, right? To a kid or a teenager or a college student, no matter what their age, their primary village is really their school and their school communities. That's where they spend most of their time. That's where their friends and their peers are. That's where they have good connections. I mean, that from their perspective, like as parents, we know that their primary village is their family. But in terms of where their orientation tends to be. And so the trick for us is to help them develop greater awareness of the larger village that they're in. And, this is something that I think teenagers are pretty good at grasping, to just say to them, this is the first time in human history that human beings in every country in the world have been collaborating to try and solve a problem. There have been global pandemics before, but we haven't had the ability to communicate and collaborate in solving the problem, right? We're doing, sometimes we're doing a good job at this, sometimes we're not, but the fact of the matter is that, like, look at what you're living through, right? You are a part of this global community that has never felt as, the village just got global, basically.
Right.
And what you do here in our household is going to affect our county's numbers of people who get this, and our local hospital, whether or not they get overwhelmed, and that's going to affect our state, our nation, you know what I mean? Like the whole thing, like helping them just sort of see that they're playing a role right now in a global village.
I carrying that theme one step further, because you talk about a lot about the dinner table, a lot about how you can help your kids feel like they're part of something bigger, and de facto, as you just said, they are. Give us a little more instruction one step further of how to talk about this with our kids, how to orient them with some of their anxiety, and have everything not also be about the pandemic.
Yeah, I think it's pretty hard to have everything not be about the pandemic, but in our own little households, we can sort of switch back and forth. So controlling the amount of news that we have on and being really mindful about that, going back to, like, this is a time when it's actually really much easier for a lot of families to eat dinner together, for example, and we are like having 21 meals a week together, and so really going back to sort of an analog, old-fashioned way of living can be quite joyful. I've talked to a lot of families that are finding incredible joy in that aspect of living through this. And then it's not that it's not all about the pandemic, because it does feel really different. It also, at the same time, you can also sort of start to see silver linings, talk about what you feel grateful for, all the way. I mean, it sounds sort of grim, but I think it's really important for us as parents to continue to raise the issue of how much worse it could be. That's it's a little gratitude brain trick that helps us kind of get out of our pity party around the things that are difficult with this. So actually having their brains imagine how this can be worse. We don't really have to look very far to see places where it is worse, unfortunately. So keeping in mind that that there are silver linings in all of this. I think also a way to answer your question more directly, a way that we can sort of get our kids to think about the sort of larger meaning of this for them and their larger connection is to ask them directly, what role do you want to play in this? Mm-hmm. You are playing a role, no matter your age, really, right? And so, but it's particularly relevant for middle schoolers on, to really get them to think, to say, okay, your grandchildren are going to ask you about this experience. So, I've got, my kids are all, the girls anyway, I have 3 girls and a boy. The girls are madly journaling about all of this because they're thinking about how they're going to reflect on this and they want to be able to remember. And then thinking about, okay, so what are your strengths in this piece. What can you bring to this? I just had a lovely conversation with my youngest who just finished her last final, and she's looking into, she's going to be doing some training for a crisis center, a teen crisis center, right? So that teens who are struggling with abusive situations in this they could call and have somebody to talk to, be connected with resources and that kind of thing. And like, this is a thrilling idea to think that she could help in this way. There, like, very little encouragement was needed. Just, I think that she wouldn't have done it on her own. I think us adults, we sort of understand what is out there for them to do. And I think sometimes they need to be connected to that. They don't always see their own power or their own ability to engage, right? I think that there's like a real logistics role that those of us with more experience can help out with.
That's great. Good for her too. That's setting such a good role model. There's a lot of questions I think that come from parents of middle school and teen boys. I'm going to pick one from Tisha. She says, my son is doing fine and is on his Xbook and phone all day. He doesn't want to go out. How do I get him out of the house without forcing him? He's 16.
That's so hard. So the thing that's happening with teen boys is that they're really connecting through video games, right? So they're not really sitting alone in their rooms playing video games, which is like what it would have been when I was a teenager or when my brother was a teenager, right? They're also talking to each other. They're FaceTiming while they're playing. And a lot of these multiplayer games, so they see each other in the game and they see each other on their phones. So we call this double screening in my household, because at first it's like, this is a disaster, right? But actually, I think that this is just the way that they can connect. This is the way that they can be with their friends. You know, my daughters have never been big video game players. They would dabble in it, but they're playing more video games now because they want to connect with their male friends. And so it was actually my daughters who explained it to me. Like, it's not, this is like their form of socializing. They get to do something together. So my first recommendation is to see it as the best way that they know how to connect with their peers. And so it's more than just playing a video game, right? It has positive social benefits for them, and we don't want them to withdraw too much. Now, the question about getting them outside and getting exercise and all that kind of stuff is a tough one. As most parents of teenagers know, it's pretty darn hard to get a teenager to do something that they don't actually already want to do. So the best thing that we can do is look for their existing motivations, right? What are they? They aren't going to be motivated to get outside because it's what we want for them. They're not going to be motivated by the same reasons that we have. But they will be motivated by the same things the things that they're already inspired by. So allowing them to, we allow our son who's 17 to go for bike rides, social distancing bike rides with his friends. And they meet up in a place and they wear masks if they have to go someplace where they're going to be close together. And they, for the most part though, we require that they stay on these pretty wide fire trails. And because there's no parking anywhere near it, they're completely empty. So they have to go during the week and they're pretty empty and they have to ride their bikes there. And there's all these things, but because he was motivated to see his friends, that's, what we decided would work. I know that's controversial, and not every family would be comfortable with that. That's just a decision that our family has made.
We'll all agree that everyone has their definitions for social distancing, and it's good here. There's a lot of people getting puppies. That seems to be getting kids outside.
Yeah.
Here's
two people in my family.
Yeah. Here's a question from Lisa. My 15-year-old daughter has difficulty knowing how to initiate or keep a text chat or phone chat going. she's pretty good with face-to-face. Any tips?
My tip is don't worry about it. That is, cross that off the list of things for you as a parent to worry about. These kids are working it out themselves. If she's pretty good with face-to-face, if she's having, if she has interaction over text or chats or Snapchat or whatever with her friends, that's great. So long as they're not withdrawing completely and not seeing anyone or talking to anyone on the phone, they're fine. They're fine. And they, they know how to keep a text chat going better than we do.
Right.
So it's actually okay. I think it's smart. I think that kids who know how to put it away and let a text thread end actually do better than the ones who can't let it go.
A great skill.
Don't worry about it.
That's a good skill. It's a good lead into the next question from Julie. Any advice on managing the disappointment teens are feeling right now? Every day something important to them is canceled or missed. Prom, I mean, I so feel for seniors. Proms, dances, SATs, things that they really can't get back.
They really can't get back, and they've really been looking forward to, and they're really sort of rites of passage that mark their growing up, right? Like that allow them to leave those pieces of childhood behind and sort of force us to see them as growing up or even grown up. I mean, I will never forget the first prom my oldest went to, right? This just like, as a parent, witnessing them all dressed up and looking, they're all in their adult bodies, it's just so strange as a parent. And there is something that is very much a rite of passage for both the parents and the kids about all of these things. So I think that the first piece of it, there's kind of 3 things, maybe 4 things that we can talk about, the way that we can help them through this and handle it. And the most important thing is really to acknowledge the loss, right? So as parents, we don't want to see our kids be in pain, and we kind of want to just fix their suffering. And I'm seeing a lot of parents right now, totally understandably, rush to, well, we're going to have a prom over the summer, or we're going to make it up, or we're going to fix it, right? We're going to make it not so bad. And I think that that's fine to like talk about if you want to make it up or mark the rite of passage some other way at another time. But it's important not to try and fix it, because this is a real loss that's spurring real grief in them. And for many kids, the lucky ones, this is their first experience with real grief and real loss. And so that's the potential. Here's the silver lining. These kids are going to understand grief better and how to handle it in a healthier way going forward. You hate to see them deal with so much difficulty all at once. And there's an upside to it in terms of skills. So for us, right, acknowledging the loss in and of itself and just the difficulty of that is the first step. And if that's all we do, we're doing pretty well, right? Like to just help them name their feelings, that they're feeling so strong. And I would say that's the second thing that we want to do. We want to really do a little emotion coaching, since we're talking about the Raising Happiness days, right? This is really good for kids of all ages. It also works on spouses in case it's just helping people name their feelings. This is the kind of name it to tame it technique you might have heard of, where, when kids are feeling something so big, it can be really hard to see all the nuances of the different emotions. They're going to be feeling a lot of different things. And if we can help them just label it and then validate the emotion that they're feeling, so yes, I can understand why you would be angry and frustrated about that. And, if I were in your shoes, I would be too. So not saying I am too, right? Like I feel angry too, because you don't really want to make it about yourself. You get to have your own feelings about it. I think it's more helpful for kids if we let them have their time just exploring what they're feeling, and they don't have to like necessarily deal with our feelings as well. So naming it and then talking to them about grief. And I have gone back to the old standard of 5 stages of grief. There's now 6 stages actually, that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross originally came up with in the 60s, and then in the 70s, David Kessler came in and tried, help there, because originally it was around the death of a person, and no doubt some kids are dealing with the death of people, but when we're talking about the loss of a prom or a graduation, or even just a final project or something that they had been looking forward to, it still applies, just maybe not as big, right? That it's not, or as lasting. So helping kids understand, well, denial is the first stage of grief, and it's really common. And look, which of your friends are stuck in denial, right? Those are the kids who are pretending like this is no big deal, or that they don't need to social distance or whatever. That's a stage of grief. And then anger, right? Like a lot of anger tends to be much more visible. The important thing to remember with teenagers is that a lot of times anger is displaced, right? So they can be angry at the world, angry about the loss, and then they take it out on a sibling or their mother, who's just trying to help. So helping them understand that anger is a part of grief. It's a common feeling that happens when we are experiencing a loss, and it's also possible to misdirect your anger, right? And that maybe this is not really about that look that your brother just gave you, and maybe it's just more about the whole situation. Bargaining is another stage of grief. So this is like the unending negotiating that a lot of teenagers are doing, related to like, can I go see so-and-so and all that kind of stuff. That's just bargaining. Depression, so that's prolonged sadness, and prolonged loneliness can start to show up as depression. And that's starting to happen right around now. Like, we've been at this long enough that that's a common thing. And, I think it's, when we were talking about mental health, I really actually don't want our teenagers or parents to be worried about prolonged feelings of sadness when they're appropriate, when there's just loss after loss after loss for these kids. And as the situation has unfolded, for some of them, they've lost every mile marker, and now they may, like one of my kids was all so excited to be a camp counselor this summer for the first summer. And this was like, so now that she's just lost, and we don't know if she's going to be able to go back to college. And so, all of that makes them sad over a period of time. And that sadness is appropriate, right? We tend to think of mental health as like the ability to be happy no matter what. And mental health is not like that, right? It's not like physical health, where we really worry if you don't feel good physically. Mental health is about feeling the emotions that are appropriate to the situation. And sadness is just appropriate. And so we don't want them to feel anxious about their challenging feelings of sadness, right? We don't want to sort of make them feel bad about feeling bad when it's appropriate for them to feel bad, right?
I mean, it's a great, and maybe in a lot of ways you've answered this, going through the stages of grief. There in particular a question from Naomi saying, what suggestions do you have for building resiliency? Because so many opportunities to up skills and teach that. And of course that requires a pretty skilled parent to be able to model resiliency. And so can you talk a little about, and also, I mean, let's leave it at that, and then we'll move to the next one. I won't merge
So
those.
you just answered that question. It's modeling resiliency yourself, right? And so don't worry. So I think that there are probably like a large portion of listeners just went, oh my God, am I a skillful parent? Right? Like, do I have the skills for resiliency? Because this feels really hard. So it's just one of those things that, yes, you're fine, right? Like, it's not rocket science, but it does require a fair amount of self-reflection, right? So looking at what are positive coping skills and what are negative coping skills. Like, what do we have in our toolkit that we're using to comfort ourselves during this really hard time? What am I modeling as a parent, for starters, right? I'm getting a lot of memes about day drinking. Day drinking is a negative coping skill. Negative coping skills are the ones that, I mean, it's a funny joke, right? Like, it's just like the way our culture makes light of how hard it is, right? But it is like, what are the things that we do that make us feel better in the moment that over the long term don't build resiliency, but actually have some negative side effects? So stress baking is one that keeps coming up in my household, where we're talking about, like, is stress baking a positive coping skill or a negative coping skill, right? So we've landed on the fact that it's positive if you give what you bake away, right? So, which is tricky in and of itself, because nobody really understands what's safe and what's not in terms of food. But we have decided that, you know, we have my first husband's family, we are quarantined with them. They live up the street, and so the kids all go back and forth. Even stepkids go back and forth. It's just like one big, so we can bake for each other. And it's just like I think so that positive coping skill, because it's an act of creativity, right? It makes us feel better in the moment. It's only negative if we overeat sugar. Yeah.
Well, it reminds me of the adage, opposite action. So, you know, just in thinking about getting our kids outside, you might feel like sitting on the couch. Get outside and see if you can get someone to join you.
Right. And I think that people underestimate how influential our own well-being as parents is, right? So we can get really anxious about whether or not our kids are spending too much time on their screens or how they're doing or whatever. But our anxiety isn't going to help them at all, right? And we're going to do our best problem solving if there is a problem to be solved, when we're calm, when we've, you know, taken the walk around the block, when we've taken a nap, when we've done what it is that we need to do to feel good. And sometimes that's a lot, right? What I'm hearing in all my clients and noticing in myself is that I need more sleep. I need more, like, I'm not motivated for like normal everyday routines. Like I need more help with motivation. Just remembering, like, you know, to brush my teeth, basic things. Like, imagine how our kids are feeling if I'm like a full grown person who's never had hygiene problems before, you know? So, I mean, noticing that, like, this is a hard time, even if we're doing okay. And it's still like our routines are all disrupted. And so that's okay. We need to give ourselves what we need.
You know, there are a series of questions around Zoom fatigue, Zoom assignments. You know, those of us with kids in college and beyond are kind of really winding down. Kids that are in middle and high school still have a ways to go. And how do you know, it's the parents are just asking, you know, how do we help them keep feeling serious about their schoolwork and engaged when we're also empathetic with the situation they're in?
I mean, it's hard. I think this is, once again, acknowledging their feelings about things. Like, it's normal to feel exhausted after being on Zoom all day. That's like not a normal human interaction. And so it just takes more out of us. Everybody I've talked to says it takes a lot out of us. We're so fortunate that we have this so that we can be connected to one another. And at the same time, it's just takes more energy. Our routines are all off, you know, so helping them understand that, like, when all your routines are all disrupted, it makes all these Zoom things, all all these things much harder. When you're used to going to school, there's a lot of sort of leavening things at school. You get to see your friends, that makes you happy, that gives you energy, right? And then you're sort of like guided. If you're like, your life is like a river, you're guided by the edges of the bank that the school provides. You know, one of the things that we're all learning in my family is just how guided by external structures our lives are. And when everything relies just on yourself and your own motivation, it just takes a lot more effort. So paying attention to routines, like getting them to see having a regular sleep schedule is more important than ever. Having them, especially with teenagers, like letting them ask you for support around structure, right? So, you know, and I keep saying, how can I support you in this? What would be helpful? Can I don't want to be in a reminding or a nagging kind of a role, but you know, what if we go for a walk together after dinner every day? Would that be helpful? Would you like that as like I can provide some of the riverbanks a little bit for you. I'd also like you to provide it for me, right? And that can help increase their sense of confidence, which is a core psychological need for any human, but especially an adolescent, to just sort of say like, I'm struggling too. And you could actually help me a lot.
That's great wisdom. I'm curious, give an example of how your teen would be creating that for you.
So my youngest, it's so funny that it's my youngest, but she has gotten into the habit of tucking me into bed at night, because I'm prone to read a lot later than I'm comfortable. But so we had this whole discussion about how I was always a super early riser. I've always been, and I feel better if I get up, I get outside first thing in the morning, and if I exercise. But when this whole thing started happening, I wasn't going to my yoga class in the morning, and I wasn't like motivated to do it on Zoom, and I didn't want to, you know what I mean? Like it just all fell apart for me totally. And so I was talking about that, and about how if I could just get myself out of bed in the morning, and then it was, if I could just get myself to go to sleep by 10, I would do so much better. So now she comes in, she has a little alarm. She thinks this is hysterical and loves nagging me about it. And she'll come in and she does all these impressions of me when, like when she was little, like I used to sing her songs and all. I mean, she has unearthed stuff that I didn't even remember. And so it's a comedy routine. Like the other kids come in to watch what she'll come up with next. But it actually works. She turns out the light and she closes the door. Like she takes the book away. Right?
That's fantastic. This next question, I think, it's an appropriate question whether you're in COVID-19 pandemic days, but it's exacerbated. So the question is around managing boundaries when parents have families that are more permissive about going out, getting together, and your kid is left home angry, mad, and quarantined.
Yeah. So this is where it's important to remember that it's okay if your kid is angry and quarantined, right? Like they don't have to like your family rules. And I think that, well, what my own kids have told me is that, they feel a little relieved that we're so clear and so rigid about it, right? Like one of the hardest things for me as a parent is to know like what to do, right? Like what the rules should even be. There's so little information. And so imagine how that must feel to a kid, right? They know that they want to be with their friends and they're confused about everything, but they aren't really sure like what's right, like because there's a lot of like, oh, that family's not doing it well, and a lot of whatever. I spent a half an hour on the phone today with my first husband and his wife trying to decide a decision around their daughter, right? Like because what they do affects us. And we were like looking at the website, Johns Hopkins website, and trying to figure it all out. But then we came up with really clear guidelines. she was really mad, and that's okay, right? It's like, okay, so this is what we've decided as a family. We're sticking together on this. We're so sorry that this is not what you were hoping for. I don't expect you to be happy. I think that's, as parents, where we really get into trouble, is when we basically accept, we really want our kids to be happy about all of this stuff. We don't want them to be uncomfortable.
That's my favorite pass along: empathy, no action.
Yeah.
So this, you raised the pity party before. We're kind of in the pity party space right now. So one question: at this time when kids are having their own pity parties, how can we help them raise their EQ? I mean, some of it's modeling, but I think there's an exceptional number of questions in the boy zone coming through, because they're quarantined. They're often playing video games. Parents don't know how they feel. And it's not a unique situation, but we're all really at a loss in that space.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so the pity party is one thing and the boys are kind of another. So let's talk about them both. I think all teenagers, this just isn't boys, but we need to be really mindful that they need a lot of privacy right now, right? Because they used to have all this privacy when they went to school. And so we can start to feel concerned if they're spending a lot of time alone in their room, or if they're staying up all night playing video games or whatever. Like, there's a lot to be concerned about. I don't recommend allowing that, but sometimes what they're doing, what I'm seeing again and again, is that the kids just need, especially the boys, they just need space. They don't want to talk about their feelings. They were the like strong silent type before this thing happened, right? Like, and so so long as you have some time together in really predictable places, and I am a huge fan, this, I have been for years, for decades, of the structured dinner time conversation. I'm still doing it, even with my older teens. I think that that's a great way to draw them out and sort of learn a little bit about their inner world. And then you kind of got to let them go back to their rooms and do their thing. Okay, the pity party question is an interesting one. This is such a great opportunity for kids to see that there are basically two ways to be in the world when things aren't going well. One is as a victim, and you can be, miserable and blaming, criticizing everybody else. If you're acting as a victim, there's always a villain, a persecutor, and usually it's not the coronavirus. Usually it's the parent, it's somebody closer in than that. And there's a rescuer. Maybe the other parent is the rescuer. Like, you could fix this. Like, victims are constantly trying to enlist other people to solve their problems for them. And it never works. It creates a drama triangle that is at the base of all of our good stories and movies and stuff, but it doesn't really work to be a victim in life. The alternative is to become a creator. Victims can become creators, and that's where they sort of step into, like, what role are you going to play in this, right? Which of your feelings are self-pity and which are sadness over a real loss, right? So, like, a creator can feel things and feel them really deeply, but they're then also taking the next step forward. What is it that you're going to do with this whole thing? When you look back on this, are you going to be the whiny kid who complained and blamed and picked on his sister? Or are you going to be the one who got out there and, did something with your time in this? One of my kids has decided that when she was in high school, she's in college now, but when she was in high school, she did a couple of seasons riding horses and kind of doing the rodeo thing. And she never really mastered roping. And she has no access to horses whatsoever. She has decided that she is going to master roping a bike that she's turned upside down while ripsticking, right? Which is really hard. I don't know if you've seen it. Who cares, like, what the activity is? She is spending time every night after dinner trying to do this incredibly complex physical thing, I think that's hilarious. And also, like, more power to you. Like, that is not a skill that will ever be useful in life. And what's useful about that is you are learning how to train yourself to do something through practice.
I love your examples. So I'm going to try to get in a couple more here. This is a question that I think always, it seems simple, but it's so much more complicated. And again, going back to a lot happening around the dinner table, what are structured dinner conversations? Because I think everyone has such good intent, and then you're kind of at a loss. So talk a little bit more about the structured dinner conversation.
Yeah, you kind of have to be willing to be hokey, right? And to, so I actually have on my website a list. So this can help, because you can blame me. I have on my website a list of 15 questions to ask your kids at dinner. So you can just print that out. And I actually recommend taking yourself a little bit out of a leadership role if possible. So print it out and then cut them apart and put one under everybody's plate. And then so people take it out and they answer the question, but then have everybody go around the table and answer the question. So my all-time favorite question, we answer this at a lot of dinners, and you can answer it every day, and that's what do you feel grateful for in this. I mean, one night recently we went around the table and I asked them, how could this be worse for you, right? Like, and they were all sort of like, hey, we're doing okay today. Like, why would we ever want to think about how it could be worse? Important to ask, right? So gratitude, and thinking about, what you could lose is a way to foster an authentic gratitude. Telling family stories is also really, research shows it's really beneficial to help kids see that they're a part of this trajectory. So the thing that they're a part of something larger than themselves, that is the greater family and their ancestors and everything. And one thing about the family is that there are good times and there are hard times, and we still get through it to tell the story. So those don't have to be positive stories. They can involve like addiction and all kinds of things. Like, the research is kind of astonishing to, like, I think we tend to whitewash our family histories, and actually what's really helpful to kids is to hear that people have had struggles and they've come out okay.
I think that's a great recommendation. I think you nailed it, that parents don't like to show their vulnerabilities, and it's actually quite comforting. They see your successes, and showing your humanness is great. Here's another one. My teen refuses to take help right now, even though he is clearly struggling academically and socially. Mm-hmm. Just really shut down.
Yeah. And so that's not unusual that they would be struggling and that they would refuse help. And part of it is this battle for independence, where they've lost so much. So the 3 core psychological needs are autonomy, competence, and connection. And if any one of those is thwarted, they start to just stumble. So the thing to do is to back off, even though your instinct is to move in. And that doesn't mean disengage. It means backing off of the direction so that they can step up and start to direct themselves. So the conversation can go something like this. I have complete confidence in your ability to recover. There is still time. There is still, like, I know that you can do this thing. Here are 3 pieces of evidence, like, that would justify my confidence in your competence. So prepare, dig, like, use things from the past, right? You need to find reasons why that they are competent, and then say, I am going to let you fix this in whatever way you think is appropriate to fix it. I am standing by. Please ask me for help. I will support you, but you need to ask me for it, because then you're reestablishing the independence piece of things, and the connection is there because you're not disengaging. You are providing warmth and support and also confidence, just when you're really not so confident, right? Like we have to look for the reasons why. It's a really hard thing. It's also a profoundly wonderful thing for kids to have to do. And this is the time to practice it. This is something that kids need, they need us to back off more than we tend to anyway. But now it's like, you know what, if kids don't do well in their classes right now, I don't really think it's going to matter very much. It's certainly not going to matter as much as it would have another time. Like colleges are going to, like this spring semester, like I am sure that they will have a formula for throwing it out. And so the risk is lower. So take it, shore up your courage. You can do it. And this is the time.
That is, really powerful wisdom. And I think parents feel that inside, but you articulate it so well.
Oh,
I mentally wrote that down verbatim, just so you know. So this might be the $1 million question, given parents' anxiety and the amount of time kids are online. Do you have any effective strategies for keeping kids safe and assuring appropriate behavior when they're online? And,
yeah.
Well, on something else, because this is tough.
Okay, it's really hard, and I think that there are some best practices here, and I do think that so middle schoolers and younger, even 8th graders and many 9th graders are not mature enough to have total privacy online. We need to be in their business a little bit until they prove that they use good judgment, and we don't. So that means having passwords, periodically looking at their phones, not doing it behind their back, letting them know, like, look, we wouldn't just give you the keys to the car and tell you, learn all the rules yourself with no driving lessons. And sometimes the way that we learn is by making mistakes, right? So we're gonna be watching you on this. I have had some of the best lessons with my kids have come when one of them has made a mistake on social media and another parent has flagged it for me, or one of their siblings has flagged it for me, because they're like, watching, because you can't see anything. You can take a random sample, right, and just check in. And so then the conversations around that are, can be really important to help them understand, I know that you wanted attention. Is that the best way to get it? Like having those kind of mature conversations. Now, that's for younger kids. Kids, you start to remove the scaffolding so that they have more and more freedom. There's like basic technology hygiene, right? Not sleeping with your phone in your room, having a place outside to charge, learning about blue light, and teenagers are very sensitive to blue light, more sensitive than adults. So helping them understand the biology around it, all very important. Now, I have sort of revised my thinking around a lot of screen time through all of this. And I think that we should back off on like trying to provide constant limits around this and instead focus on the white space, the non-screen time space. When is it really important for kids to not have their phones and not, so meal times, really important. Trying to teach them to eat their breakfast without looking at their phone. This means that we can't have phones in the kitchen either, right? Like we can't do it either. And so kind of going back to this, like it's really hard for a lot of people and a lot of kids in particular to just sit with the stillness of not having the stimulation and of a screen. So just really work on the no screen times. If that's only one meal a day, I think it's actually fine. Well, I think they need more than just one meal a day being off their phones, but you need to carve out a few things and focus on those things. And so long as they're sort of doing all the other big things, they're able to do their schoolwork, they're able to focus, do their schoolwork, and they're able to get enough sleep, they're able to come to dinner without hiding a phone in their pocket or whatever, then they're managing it well enough.
Great. Again, modeling good behavior.
Yes.
I'm thinking about the bad boy daddy in our house.
I know. Well, my Martha Beck taught me you've got to live it to give it. And that's like the most important thing with all of this.
We're going to talk about that. Okay, so this is our closing question. And can you leave us with one thing that parents can do to make the situation maybe better, maybe a little easier for their kids?
Yes. Well, I just mentioned it. It's pick the one thing that you can do for yourself, because then you're modeling positive coping. Like, what do you need to comfort yourself through this whole thing? That's positive. So maybe it is a walk, or maybe you need to get back to the meditation practice that you used to love. Or maybe it's just like sitting on the floor playing with your new puppy, whatever it is that is genuinely comforting to you, that will bring comfort to your family as well, to your kids. That our emotions are very contagious. And when we let our anxiety ratchet up, or when we deal with our challenging emotions by numbing them, by looking at a screen or having an extra glass of wine or comfort eating or there are lots of ways that we can deal with our negative emotions. When we deal with them in a way that is truly comforting, that is a positive coping mechanism, we actually diffuse the negative emotion in our household, and it creates a culture of calm.
Thank you. On behalf of a large population of parents, thank you for so much wisdom. And to everybody who is zoomed in with us today, thank you for joining, and to our sponsors. And please look at ParentMap.com for upcoming events. And we wish you all a wonderful, interesting dialogue dinner tonight. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.